All right. All right. I'm going to call us to order. This is a hearing, a public hearing for the Economic Development Committee concerning the mayor's proposed budget. I want to thank my colleagues who are here, Council President Pro Tem Priscilla Tyson, Councilmember Michael Stinziano, Councilmember Shannon Hardin. Before we jump into the agenda, I want to note that we lost a really special person in Columbus's economic development community today, Reese Nieder. He has done so much for our small businesses in our city through sheer force of personality and hard work and just incredible dedication to making Columbus better. So before we begin, I would like to take a brief moment of silence to remember Reese. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Again, the intention of this public hearing is to review the proposed 2017 operating budget for the economic development efforts of our city. We are joined by Development Director Steve Shoney, who will present an overview of economic development budget efforts, and then we will have discussion and questions and take any witnesses if there are. Director Shoney.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council. Thank you for your attention today. I have a few slides that I'd like to go through, and then obviously would be happy to take any questions. And then, as always, if the questions get too hard, I will ask some members of my team to come forward and help me out. You all have seen this slide before in some of my other presentations. This is an overview of the department's overall budget. As I've discussed earlier, our overall budget is, the request for 2017 is $34.1 million. That's for both CDBG and the general fund, as well as our emergency human services budget. That is essentially a flat budget, a slight decrease from last year. And as I've discussed in other forums, we are making a lot of that up with some of our other revenue sources, like the land management fund, home funds, a couple of other sources. To give you some sense of perspective in terms of the areas that we're going to be discussing today. Today I'm going to be discussing our economic development division as well as our planning division. Those two divisions respectively make up 9% and 6% of our budget for the Department of Development. However, if you were to do a dollars per column inch of newspaper, I think the Economic Development Division is one that gets a lot of attention, rightly so, because it's important in driving our city forward. The Economic Development Division budget request for this year provides a slight decrease in our budget from general revenue and CDBG funding. In 2016, our budget was $5.146 million. Our budget request for 2017 will be approximately $4.9 million. That's about a 5% decrease. That decrease is largely in the general revenue fund. We are shifting some funds around between general revenue and CDBG. Additionally, we will be funding, doing some funding through our tax incentive fees that we collect. So this budget includes $700,000 to assist economic development efforts being put forth by Columbus 2020. The division will continue to focus our efforts on retention and expansion of new businesses. We, in the last year, instituted a new and more robust program to go out and do one-on-one visits with companies. We've actually, I think, a couple of the council members here have joined us on some of those visits. It's been a very productive part of what we're doing, getting out, seeing not just those companies that we've already done business with and done incentives with, but getting out and seeing, more importantly, those who we haven't, to uncover what the opportunities for growth might be, and just as importantly, what challenges they're having, so that we can make sure we keep businesses strong in our city. And it's been very important for us to include members of council, particularly Councilmember Brown and Councilmember Harden as chairs of important parts of our portfolio to include you in those, and we've appreciated having you in those. $1.4 million in CDBG funding will be used to support small business development, including economic development and lending programs. We'll be having $100,000 for Franklin County Port and Finance Authority and $25,000 for the pursuit of federal funding for transportation infrastructure projects. The city's federal lobbying effort is funded through the Department of Development and through our line items in economic development. That's where that funding comes from. A couple additional initiatives that we're funding through our budget. We have $75,000 for the Columbus Sister Cities, our Greater Columbus Sister Cities program. I know that Councilmember Harden and Councilmember Tyson, President Pro Tem Tyson, have both participated in their programming and have found it very helpful in terms of understanding what business opportunities there are for our city, how we might do some things better. And I can speak for myself, I think I speak for Councilmember Harden in the recent trip to Ghana, understanding how to better leverage some of the immigrant populations that we have in our city and how to use them as an economic development tool. So that is an important part of our budget. There we go. I'd like to talk about some of our accomplishments from last year. We successfully negotiated 24 business attraction and expansion projects, which will leverage more than $405 million in private sector investments in the city. These projects anticipate creating 3,485 new jobs and retaining over 8,700 existing jobs, which should result in $191 million of new annual payroll to the city and $3.8 million in new city income tax revenue. The ethic of our Department of Development, and in particular the Economic Development operation, is that we are the revenue generators for the city. We work very closely with the Finance Department, but we try and evaluate every deal. Not try to, we do evaluate every deal in terms of what is the return on investment for the city. That is both from a pure tax basis, what is the income in versus the income out, or versus the expenses out, but also looking at it more complex and saying what kinds of jobs are we creating in what places? Are we having inclusive growth within our city? And so this is how we try and evaluate projects. I think our team does a great job of it. I think we have the numbers to back that up, but I think it's really important to emphasize that we do view ourselves as being the front line of revenue generation for the city. And we take that mission very seriously, and we take that ROI calculation very seriously on every project that we do. We've also completed 11 public-private partnership projects that represent capital investments by the city of $16.9 million, but those $16.9 million have leveraged over $238 million of private sector investment. Our leverage ratio for last year was 14 to 1. So for every dollar of public money that we put in, we've generated $14 million in private investment. I want to talk a little bit about our Green Columbus program. This is one that, if you will, spans a little bit our two committees that Councilmember Brown chairs. The Green Columbus program in 2016 awarded $1.3 million in capital grants supporting sustainable growth. These projects include supporting LEED-based redevelopment and brownfield remediation. To give you a few examples of the projects that we've supported this year, the Ohio History Connection received a grant for $32,000. 400 West Nationwide LLC received $233,000. We spent about $32,000 with PACT. The Municipal Light Plant received a grant for $300,000. As we just passed at council last week, we supported the Urban League with $175,000. These are just a few examples. We've got a map here on the slide to show you the geographic distribution. The geographic distribution of this program does tend to be more central city oriented. These are typically brownfields. That's where you see these kinds of projects. These are redevelopment opportunities. You'll see some of these, maybe not so much last year, but in the past we've had some in more suburban locations as we've looked at LEED certification projects. So you'll see that more with new build projects. But this really does tend to be in older neighborhoods and central city program. I'm going to turn to our planning division right now. Our budget request for planning for 2017 is $1.947 million. That is an increase of 2% over our 2016 budget. These activities are solely funded through the general fund. In addition, we have added a second, in 2016, we added a second Celebrate One infant mortality focused planner that is to go, he is going to be working primarily in the Hilltop and Franklinton. Patrice Brady, who was our prior one, is going to be staying with the neighborhoods that she's been working with. We're really excited about this. This is a funding partnership with the Department of Health, and we've been working closely with them. So Dr. Long has been integral to getting the funding for this, and we appreciate their support in that. But it has been one of the things that for our planning department has really helped our planners change their view of their job to not just doing neighborhood plans, but thinking about neighborhood transformation. And so not only has it been great for the city, but it's been great for the team to have the Celebrate One focus integrated into our planning department, and it's helped ensure that this is not just a Department of Health function, but this is one of the things where you'll see the mayor's commitment to Celebrate One being integrated into everything we do as a city. And President Pro Tem, I appreciate, again, your constant advocacy for this issue and being a strong partner for the administration on this in particular. And then I have one more slide. We have had a number of accomplishments through the last year. City Council recently adopted the Northwest Area Plan, which you've got a map of here on the slide, a collaborative effort between the Planning Division, the Northwest Civic Association, and the Far Northwest Coalition. The division worked closely with a number of partners to undertake the first full year of Celebrate One planning, which I discussed earlier. The office has worked with other city staff on last year's restructuring of the UIRF effort, the Urban Infrastructure Recovery Funds. Mark Juvilis has been taking a lead on that to make sure that we get out and don't just, the UIRF program for years has been focused on, has been supposed to be about getting neighborhood input on what are the capital projects that we undertake. To be honest with you, we got away from that a little bit. And Mark and Susan DeLay in the Economic Development Division, along with the other city departments, Public Service and Rec and Parks in particular, really rededicated to that effort. And so the Planning Division takes a lead in making sure that we are getting out, reaching out to the area commissions, getting their priorities, and then when we see new opportunities, getting back to them and saying, hey, there's a new opportunity, do we want to readdress this? We're doing that right now in Milo Grogan, for example, where we're taking a look at maybe taking a look with the area commission at how do we rethink Second Avenue and rethink Second as the connection point to the Short North, and seeing if we can use Second Avenue to funnel that energy that's happening at Short North, connect the Short North, connect what's happening at Rogue, and really make Second Avenue, how do we begin the process of making Second Avenue a great another great street within the city. It's one of those streets that I drive and I get really excited, and you see the potential in that street. So we're using UIRF to do that. That's the kind of work that planning is doing to help get us ready to realize our potential. The staff undertook a significant update of the University District overlay in 2016. We will be coming to council very soon in 2017 with legislation to implement that, particularly along our commercial corridors, and then we'll have a second set that will be coming into the neighborhoods. As you'll recall, we had some discussions early in the year where the neighborhood was very concerned about the High Street corridor and the Neal Avenue corridor and making sure we got those pieces of the code updated. So Kevin Wheeler and his team have been working very hard with the community to learn what we've learned over the last year of having the university area plan updated, seeing how the plan has corresponded to reality so that when we come to you with code changes, we have code changes that are informed by living with the plan for a period of about a year and then having further discussions with the neighborhood so that we really can present to you what we think are code changes that will be something that will guide the city in a very strong fashion moving forward. And then finally, Planning Department also worked with the Department of Technology to launch what we call CSIR. I have no idea what that acronym stands for. It's C-SIR. But what it is it's a GIS interface where you can get access to zoning districts, planning overlays, abatement areas, the county auditor's website, everything you need to do a fairly in-depth analysis of a piece of land to understand its development potential, whether you're trying to develop it or you live next to it and you want to understand what's happening, you want to understand what kinds of things you need to be watching for. They worked with the Department of Technology to develop this tool that we've been rolling out to the general public. It's a fantastic tool. I use it all the time. Just used it today when I was looking at a site to try and understand what the implications of what someone is proposing for a site. So we think it's a great way to bring the city forward and help our transparency and really help our citizens. That's everything I had in prepared and, as with me, always semi-prepared comments. So look forward to your questions. And again, thank you as always for your support both through the budget process and in everything we do as a department.
Thank you, Director. I do have a question about part of this budget includes funding for, you highlighted Sister Cities and PACT, also is Rev 1 Ventures and Columbus 2020, and about 800,000 for those two together, although they are separate entities. So can you talk about, those are they are real economic development endeavors, supposed to be job creators, all of those things. And you touched on the ROI process of us looking at a traditional deal we do, or even a non-traditional deal we do. How do you measure our return on investment in investing in those kinds of organizations?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And I can get you specific metrics that, and I should have brought them with me today. I apologize for not bringing them. With 2020 in particular, in terms of our investment with them and the progress we're making on achieving their goals for capital investment, job growth, meeting average wage growth, and being known as a premier economic development location around the country. We are ahead of plan to meet all of 2020's goals that they set out 10 years ago that seemed completely unachievable. I remember when they were set out in terms of all of those metrics, and we are ahead of plan to reach those goals by 2020. And we are ahead of plan for the city's portion of that as well. So we are doing very well on those. I'll be happy to get to you and all of the members those specific metrics, but we're doing well. 2020, essentially what we did is we outsourced our marketing and a portion of our sales function. That's how I describe it to private sector folks when we're talking to them about what the roles are. We still have a good portion of the sales, and we have the production staff in our economic development team, and it's a very, very close partnership. They work very closely with us. As it relates to Rev 1 Ventures, Rev 1 Ventures is a grant that is largely to support leveraging state funds through the Third Frontier program. I will tell you that over the next year, and certainly over the next year and definitely over the next 2 years, we're going to be facing some fundamental questions about that program because the Third Frontier funding is just about exhausted. We've been doing this with Rev 1 Ventures. It's been very productive, but we've been talking with Councilmember Hardin and the Small Business Committee about how do we think forward about what's the best way to encourage high growth potential entrepreneurs, which is really what our Rev 1 grant is about, is how do we best foster those kind of entrepreneurs and build that technology entrepreneurship in the city. It's time to re-examine that, and we're going to be doing that. We will still be partnering with Rev 1 in some function, in some way, because they are a fantastic resource. How that partnership plays out over the next 2 years, I don't know. That's what we need to go in and look at.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this is pretty much a continuation budget, except for, I know the addition in planning and the land development. I certainly, last night, had the opportunity, when I went to the graduation for the Celebrate One for their first group of community health workers, had the opportunity to certainly speak with the gentleman who is now a part of your team, who will be focusing on Franklinton and the Hilltop, and certainly had the opportunity to work with him in the health department in terms of, safe walks to school and other things of that nature. So it really is important that that the other departments are very much involved in Celebrate One, because, as we know, it's certainly not, it's not a health issue. There are other issues, and where you live plays a significant role in terms of these issues, reducing infant mortality. And so having a planner focusing in those neighborhoods and helping to, let us know what we need to do and what needs to be done differently so that those neighborhoods can continue to thrive is very, very important. So I appreciate the partnership between the Department of Development and Public Health in terms of helping our overall community. And then we'll also, I think, share with the rest of our colleagues. There's so many other areas that it touches upon that we need to improve upon. And so I thank you for that. Also, when you mentioned 2nd Avenue, I'm pretty excited about that, because I drive 2nd Avenue a lot, just kind of a shortcut to get through town. But I also, my grandmother lived in that neighborhood, and of course she's deceased now, but certainly I see what's going on in the Milo Grogan area, and I know the houses that are on 2nd Avenue leading to the short north. I think that there could be some great development going on there. So I'm excited that you are focused on 2nd. So thank you. And just really do appreciate you, Director Shoney. I think I tell you that a lot. I know I have a lot of questions I always ask you, but I appreciate the work, because you are the engine. You are the engine. If we're not bringing in, retaining and attracting businesses, we're not going to get our income tax, and we're not going to be able to provide all the other services in our community. So I just want to personally thank you and your team, and thank you, Chairwoman Brown, for your leadership with economic development. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Brown. Certainly want to echo President Pro Tem Tyson's appreciation for the work that you do, Chairman Brown, but also Director Shoney, you and your team. Working with you on the small business side and your team has been really insightful over the last couple of years, but I think that it's also been impactful as well. I wanted to pick your brain on how can we use, and I know that we do, economic development agreements, EDAs, to further encourage small business, minority contracting in the community, but also minority hiring. And certainly there's something that Chairwoman Brown pushes a lot. Also, that those jobs that we're finding are of a livable wage. And how can we continue to kind of lean in on those conversations, and so that our community knows what our expectation is as a city?
Thank you, Councilmember Harden, for those questions, and thank you, President Pro Tem, for your kind words. A couple things. As it relates to being more inclusive in our contracting, it's something we're taking a close look at. My Deputy Director, Quentin Harris, has been working very closely and serving on a couple teams with Director Francis in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to find ways to bring opportunities with the city to them. Also to see, are there things that we can do to put these businesses that DOI is working with in front of more companies, and to see if there are things we can do. We're trying to do not just small things, we're trying to be very purposeful about how we do this. So for example, we just went through, or we're literally in the middle of the process of evaluating proposals on the North Market. And we worked with Director Francis and his team, with Thomas too, to make sure that we had in the RFP a requirement that proposers give us a statement about what is their diversity and inclusion plan. 5 out of 7, I was just looking to see if there was press in the room. 5 out of 7 of the proposers did that and had meaningful and thoughtful statements about that portion. We're going to be working with Director Francis and his team to make sure that we follow through on that. As it relates to the livable wage question, as you all know, we're doing an incentive study. The HRNA is going through the data now. Quentin Harris and Tanya Barnett have been leading that charge. We have asked them to look at among their policy, along with the other things they're analyzing in the policy analysis, what would it mean to increase the minimum wage on which we provide an incentive to $15 an hour? That is when we asked them that question, I was really pleased with the response that we got because they asked us a lot of questions back. And so they're going to look at the nuances of that because, someone is taking those jobs and those jobs are important to someone. And so the questions of how do we deal with providing a living wage while still providing a low rung on the ladder that people can get that first handhold is something we're going to have to wrestle with. And I think getting some help in wrestling with that question is the right thing. And I appreciate Councilmember Brown sort of asking us to ask that question. And so we're going through that in the incentive study. It's something we talk about a lot internally, and I'm looking forward to kind of trying to really put some structure around the conversation.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Director, can you speak to the relationships that we have with the municipalities in terms of economic development and resources and how we work together?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Quentin Harris serves on the board of the Mid-Ohio Development Exchange, MODE, and that is kind of a clearinghouse for us to work with other municipalities around Central Ohio. The cooperation varies from community to community. We're trying to get better at it. The other thing that the administration did is they brought on within our department Mike Shattuck. As you all know, Mike used to sit in a seat similar to yours in Upper Arlington, and so he has a unique perspective on what it means to be a suburb in Central Ohio, in the Columbus region, excuse me. Doing that outreach and understanding what our partners need is really important. We, I think, do have good relationships. I will tell you that when we are up against Dublin or New Albany or Westerville or Worthington or Grove City, and it's a competitive project, and it's an existing company in one of our communities, we have a really good relationship where we pick up the phone and call each other and say, hey, we've been approached by this company that's in your territory. We're going to play, but we're not going to incentivize those jobs that are there already. We're going to play by the rules on those things. We do that. We're always very careful about that, and we're very careful about how we approach that. And it goes both ways. We get those calls from other communities, and there are times when we look at it and we say to someone, they're leaving the city because they can't find what they need within the city limits of Columbus, but they found it somewhere else, and that's okay. Similarly, we'll have situations where, somebody can't find what they need within another municipality, and we'll bring them here and we'll work with them, and the other municipalities are okay with that. But it's a complex process, and it doesn't always work like that. And in those situations, we compete.
All right, Any other questions from my colleagues? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairwoman Brown. Director, as you're going out and you talked about the meetings that we've had with business owners, what are they saying in terms of how we can be even better partners? Mr. Dorian, a couple weeks ago, came back to us and said that we're looking at receipts this third quarter, coming back to saying that there are some concerns. What can we be doing better as a city? How can we continue to support and make sure that there is growth? Where is your mind at as those conversations are happening as we close out the year and looking forward?
The biggest thing that we can do for companies is to help them have access to talent. And that's a really easy thing to say and a hard thing to do. Because it is, when you start to unpack that, that really is everything we do. So that's a transportation problem, that's an education problem, that's a placemaking issue. So when I talk about the importance of planning and having planning integrated with everything else that we do, planning is about making places that people want to be. And the way to keep a business and grow a business is have that business be able to attract the talent that they need. What's really exciting to me about Smart Columbus is the ability to find new ways to connect people to jobs. So finding new ways to connect someone living in Linden to a potential job at Easton or on the south side or wherever that may be. That is what we hear most frequently from businesses, is how do I find talent, how do I keep talent, and more importantly, how do I connect talent to us? I think when you look at Rogue Fitness, that's part of the reason they like that site, is because it's a place where they can be attracted to their talent. Same thing with Huntington. Part of the reason they like being on the 161 or on the Cleveland Avenue corridor is that they're going to be on the CMAX line, and having that connection is really important. So as we look long term, that's how we see that we can help businesses, is by doing those things to connect them. That, and they always want, they want everything to be cheaper and they want less risk and they want all those things. But if there's one thing that you can put your finger on, usually it's the workforce piece.
Thank you, Director. I want to close out with one question about when you're looking at this budget and you're kind of looking forward to 2017, if you had all the resources in the world and could tackle one more great thing in this budget and in your department, what would that be? What's your wish list for Santa this year?
Well, my wish list for Santa is the administration budget. No, I think so, and it comes back to what I talked about. It's related to what I talked about before. I think the one, I went to the CMC lunch today, which had Aaron Wren, who's saw Councilmember Tyson there, when you think, he said there's nothing that's, one of his things was there's nothing really limiting us in terms of our growth. And I think he's right at one level, but from previous positions that you've had that there are two things that really limit our growth. One is how we deal with cars, AKA parking, and transit and transportation and the future of transportation and all those things. And the other is having people feel like they can get their kids to a great school in any of our neighborhoods. And I tried to be really careful in terms of how I phrase that, because it's not just about Columbus City Schools, it's about having people have the ability to get their kid to a great school in any neighborhood. Those are the things that we have to tackle. And there's not, those are things that, frankly, all the money in the world wouldn't solve automatically. It'd help, but it wouldn't solve automatically. Those are the things we really need to think about. And I think the other thing that we're going to be thinking a lot about over the next year as an administration is defining what it is we want this city to grow into. because, as the speaker today at lunch said, we have some choices to make. We don't want to be the next Atlanta. We want to be a great city where everyone feels welcome and where everyone can get to where they want to be. And that's the kind of city we want to be, and so it's tackling those challenges. That was a really long-winded answer to what should have been a fairly simple question, and I'm not sure that I answered your question, but I think I got there.
You did, and I
Okay.
knew that it would not be a simple answer. I appreciate you indulging the question and aiming high. I want to thank you, Director Shoney, and thank my colleagues for being here. I want to thank my team, Kelsey Ellingson and James Carmine, as well as the Legislative Resource Office for Council for putting together an excellent hearing today. I want to thank the Economic Development team. Director Shoney, you run a complex department with a lot of responsibilities, and your Economic Development division oversees a lean and mean operation, especially considering what it does in terms of return on investment. That 14-to-1 ratio of public dollars invested and private dollars leveraged is incredible, and I know that's testament to how aggressive that shop is. And I also know, and I know our finance chair really understands this, that our budget is becoming increasingly reliant on income tax dollars. So the daily work that you do and that your economic development team, Mark Lundin and Quentin Harris are here, that every member of that team does. It's really valuable work. So thank you.
And if I can just, I did not do a good enough job of thanking my team earlier. I think you recognized Mark and Quentin and their entire group. I feel real, we're here to talk about planning and economic development today. I feel really good about the leadership I have in those groups and the staff that I have in those groups. There is, when you're in charge of a large complex organization, until you have the right team in place, there's not much you can do. And we've got a great team in place, and that's why we're able to get so much done. And the two of them are here, and I would be really remiss if I didn't mention Kevin Wheeler and Mark Travillis and Rory McGinnis and Bill Webster and Julia Carter and our finance team. Having that group together really makes things go. And Hannah Reed is integral in terms of getting them all together and making sure that we get you all what you need to be able to help us do our jobs. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I do spy Hannah Reed back there too. So thank you very much. And I guess I will close out. Are there any other points from my colleagues? I will close out by really thanking Councilmember Hardin, the question that you asked about, how much more we can do to secure, attract, retain living wage jobs. And the incentive study that the department is doing is something that no one is surprised I'm excited about. People have heard me talk about how excited I am about this. I want to thank you for including the piece that I've discussed with you on how we can increase that floor on incentives that we offer. I think when we're talking about investing public dollars, that dollar investment needs to go after good jobs. And it's pretty clear that $15 an hour, based off of many studies, is really the bare minimum that it takes to try to raise a family in our city right now. So I want to thank you for your commitment to working with council. When we come to you with ideas and questions and suggestions, it is a good working relationship. And ultimately, all of us here sitting on this stage will measure the progress of our time on council, not just by the jobs created, but the kinds of jobs created and the ways and ability that families in this city have to raise their kids successfully in a dignified way, and that gives their kids a shot at a life even better than they had. So without further ado, I thank everyone for being here and adjourn this committee meeting.